Record on this computer.
There we go. You are recording. Thank you, Ray. Thanks, Jen. Everything's different. Okay, so we're up to lesson 3 in our series on facing Babylon. And I've just, if you open those notes I sent you, it has a bit of a revision for the benefit of those, like Rachel lets you help catch up. It's got only revision from lesson two, but I can send you lesson 1 also. But it's got here, we've been talking about the fact that Babylon, which is the present day location of Iran and Iraq, between the rivers Euphrates and Tigris rivers, back during the time of Daniel, Babylon desired to change the culture of the Israelites, the Hebrews, by actually changing the way they think and act. And we saw in the very first lesson that they desired to change 3 things. What were those 3 things? They're not on here, but Babylon did 3 things to try and change the mindset and the actions of the Hebrews when they were taken into slavery into Babylon. They did, you can just call them out. They changed their
name.
Changed the name, right?
Language.
Language.
Food.
And their food.
Diet.
Yeah. So they changed their language and literature. They changed their name. So going from Hebrew names Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah to Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They changed their names, changed their food, but we found that Daniel went before the ones in charge and said, listen, this is what we eat. We don't eat the delicacies of the king. Let us try our foods and just see how it goes. And then it worked out that they were a lot healthier and a lot fitter doing their own food. And then their names, changing their names from a Hebrew name to the Babylonian. And then we see in the last one, the 2 things that the empire tried to do to change the culture of Daniel and the other 3 was to control through fear. And that was, if you don't do what I ask you to do, you're going to die. You, your family, everyone. So you need to do what I'm telling you or you're going to die. And then the other one was to motivate good behavior, reward good behavior and compliance with the gifts, rewards, and great honor. So, and one of the things you guys were saying throughout this so far, the last 2 lessons, is you can see this sort of thing happening today, because there's no doubt we're living in an age of empire building again, where language and literature is being changed. We're being controlled through fear, particularly when you look at COVID and the time we went through with that. Motivate good behavior, so-called good behavior or acceptable behavior, is motivated with gifts, rewards, and great honor. And just trying to get us to change a mindset and all come under the one thought, the one view, the one. And so having an opinion is, I'm just going to let Honor in, having an opinion is very hard in this day and age. So I'm going to wait for Honor to come on.
In progress.
Hello, Honor.
Hello, Honor.
Hello.
Welcome.
Well,
how are you?
Thank you. How are you going?
Really well, really good. Yeah, very good. Thank you. We've just started the just the review of last lesson, which was the way in which the empire tried to control the culture in the last lesson was through fear, and also to motivate and reward good behavior and compliance with gifts, rewards, and great honor. And we saw that what we saw Daniel do during this time. So this was when the king Nebuchadnezzar was having dreams, and he wanted to know, what did these dreams mean? And this occurred 2 years after they arrived. So Daniel's about 19 years at that point. And he had the vision of the image. And we saw, let me just go through and bring up the, share the screen, bring up my thing here. and move that. So this lesson is called Things Get Hot. So you probably got to know what the story is going to be about. But Babylon desired to change their culture through fear and through you act right, you act the way we want you to act, and we will give you gifts, rewards, and great honor. So that was that one. And so what do we know about Daniel? What came out of that? We've got the list of things on that handout I sent you. What we know about Daniel was that he was a wise man. He's one of the groups of wise men in the country. He had courage to go before the king. He sought out community. Now, these are the key things. When all the wise men were going to be killed because they couldn't answer the king's request of telling him what the dream was about, he was going to kill all of them. So the first thing Daniel did was to seek out community and get together with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they prayed, they interceded. And they didn't just pray and intercede for the situation because he was about to go before the king and asking for mercy, but they also prayed for the other. He went on behalf of the other wise men who weren't even Hebrews. And so we see that he went in and declared boldly to the king that he trusted God. He used his gift. God gave an imperfect man a godly dream, and God was able to speak and declare his plan through the dream of that ungodly man, but he gave the righteous man its interpretation. Daniel was humble and meek. He remained humble and meek. And he knew who was it got humility and meekness in who actually is in control of the situation. There just was a lack of arrogance. And as a result, God was worshipped and acknowledged by the king. And the 4 men were put in control over the affairs of Babylon. Think about that. 2 years after they've arrived, in a culture that's trying to change you, trying to change them into their thinking, their way of life, 2 years after, and they're put control over the affairs of Babylon. That's pretty remarkable. So we also saw that 5 empires were revealed. So these are the 4 that we see. We see that with the dream, we saw that the head was made of gold and it was Babylon. Medo-Persian, the chest and the arms. The Greek, belly and thighs. And the Roman, legs and feet. So they really foretell 4 big empires: Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greek, and the Romans. What did the dream tell us about, though, what happened after the Roman Empire? What did the dream tell us? The dream that God gave this ungodly man. Because there's 4 empires there, but there was a 5th one that was mentioned. Laura?
Isn't it the
One's-
Christian? Yeah.
Yeah, God's empire.
God's empire.
Yeah. So the 5th empire was revealed. We call it the kingdom of Christ. It was going to be a kingdom that would come that would destroy the others. It would cause the downfall of the last one, the Roman Empire, and then it would then cause an everlasting empire that there was no way of stopping it. It would just infiltrate so many things and areas. It's interesting to note, during the week I was looking at these, and it's interesting to note that Babylon had a huge image made. The Greeks made a huge image. The Romans made a huge image, like Nero made a massive image of himself. The Greeks made the Colossus of Rhodes is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Medo-Persians didn't make a image, but I just thought it was really interesting that these other 3, the Babylonian, the Greek, and the Romans, actually made massive images themselves that rivaled the one that Nebuchadnezzar made. But the kingdom of Christ is the 5th empire revealed. So this needs to be encouraging to us, the fact that we have the kingdom of our Christ that's going to be an everlasting kingdom. This is the sort of thing we really need to grab hold of in these days where, when you imagine people in persecuted countries where they keep doing what they're doing, they keep trusting and believing in the Lord, people are being killed or people are being persecuted or imprisoned. Yet here's this promise that this kingdom is going to prevail and this kingdom is going to stretch right across the world. And really that's something that we need to just continue to hope in. So I mentioned before, Daniel's not in chronological order. It's 1 to 4, then 7 to 8, and then 5 and 6. So we don't see it as chronological order. And also, even knowing that if we take the events we know of, like Daniel in the lion's den, that takes place 66 years after the events we're about to see, after the time he arrived in, Babylon. So when Daniel was in the lion's den, he was 83 years old. So we sort of lose that time that these guys just went along being faithful, doing faithfully, steadfast and trusting God in their walk and continuing to do what they knew to do. And as a result, 66 years later, a nation was changed. In fact, our next lesson, we look at how Nebuchadnezzar's heart is changed. And he begins to worship God 15 years after the event we're doing tonight. Actually, no, this is 15 years after the one we did last time. So, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. We see that trials will happen. But this particular scripture, blessed is the man who remains steadfast. And we'll get to have a chance to look and see what that really does mean as we look at, as we continue to look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here in this particular fiery furnace event that's going to take place. There is a reward for those people who just keep trusting God and stay steadfast. Steadfast means don't crumble under trials, don't crumble under it, but continue to trust that the Lord's going to turn this around. So how this empire changed culture, let's have a look. Let's move on to see what they did this time. What was the way in which they tried to change culture? So we've got 5 verses there, 5 sections. No, we've got more than that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 things there. So let's take different parts. Who wants to take what? Daniel 3, 1 to 4.
I'll take that.
Daniel 3, 5 to 7.
Yeah, I'll take that then.
Daniel 3, 12 to 14.
I can do that one.
Daniel 3, 15 to 18.
Yep, I've got it.
Daniel 3, 22 to 25.
I'll do it.
Daniel 3, 26b. Well, read all the 26, but 26b to 28. You'll notice I've missed out some because for the benefit of us getting through this. But Daniel 3, 26b to 28. I can do that one. And Daniel 3, 29 to 30. Doesn't matter if you want. Okay, cool. Thank you. Just the timeline of this takes place 15 years after Daniel 3, where Daniel gave the interpretation of the dream of the image. The image that the dream was about was the head of gold, and then it had bronze, it had silver, it was right through clay, all different. But this image that's about to be built was all gold. So Nebuchadnezzar, it was all about him. All about this Babylonian empire and all about him. So let's start going through this. Verses 1 to 4.
All right. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together into the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages."
Verse 5 to 7.
When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, is that it?
It's got the harp. This
Zith-
has,
Oh, okay.
yep,
Lyre,
yep,
harp, pipes, and other musical instruments.
yeah.
Bow down to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshipped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
So you see the fear is still at work here. And so remembering that the empire will try and change culture, change behavior through fear. This is, hey, if you don't do it, you're going to be chucked into this fiery furnace.
Yeah.
Next one, 12 to 14. Now I will,
Yep.
yeah, go on.
Cool. This is from the Amplified.
Yep.
There
So
are
it'll take
certain-
twice as long.
right. But we'll have twice the understanding.
Yes.
There are certain Jews whom you have appointed and set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these men who were brought before the king. Then Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image which I have set up?"
Oh, so from Sunday's service, when I preached, that's living a questionable life. That's a question. Yeah, and we're about to see that they're going to answer it straight away. So here's this fear. Fear is the thing that they're continuing with. So 15 to 18. Who's doing 15 to 18?
No, I can do that if you want.
Okay.
Let me find it. 15. I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up.
So they've drawn a line in the sand. They've made a decision. They're not going to bow down to any other gods. This actually, the whole thing of worshipping him and worshipping other gods contravenes straight away their number one commandment of loving God. You shall worship no other gods but me. And so let's keep going. Let's see what's happening. Fear is being used. The demand to worship something else and not God is being forced upon them. Let's look at 22 to 25.
King's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there three men that we tied up and threw into the fire?"
They replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods."
Yes. In the original Hebrew, it says a son of the gods. Some versions might say 4th is like the son of God. Yes, so God's deliverance has come through as they've stood and just trusted him. It's interesting that looking back to, if you look at examples of the Christians in the Colosseum and in Nero's Colosseum when they were being fed to lions or had things done to them like the Roman candles and that sort of thing. There are stories that have come out of there, not in all cases, but in some cases there are stories coming out of there that some of the lions just sat down next to the people and didn't eat them. But then there's stories that others who were, as they were being consumed, were just yelling out the praises and preaching the gospel, which would have been very hard to do, or singing. So these guys were prepared to die no matter what. So let's go to 26b. I was going to read this one. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps or princes, administrators, governors, and the king's councils gathered there. And they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word." If you don't mind underlining in your Bible or highlighting on your phone Bible app, highlight that line. They frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own. That word frustrated there, it's really interesting because the word frustrated means to change the king's word. So remember, the king had said, this is the law. Everyone has to bow down and worship. He had said, this is the whole point. It was king's law. It was his word. So everyone had to obey it. And if you don't obey it, you're getting chucked in the fiery furnace. And suddenly we see him saying himself, you have frustrated my words. You have changed my words. You've changed my instructions. You've changed my law. And this particular word frustrated here in the Hebrew is what's called a perfect word. And this perfect word means in the mind of the speaker, it is an accomplished fact. It's regarded by the speaker, it's regarded by Nebuchadnezzar as an accomplished and finished fact. In other words, you've changed my mind and I'm going to stick to what I've changed my mind about. I will not go back and make a decision again about the other. You've changed my mind. You've frustrated me. You've frustrated my words. You've proven me wrong. And in my mind, I'm making a change. And that was just them standing their ground and saying, actually, I'm not going to compromise in the worship of God. I'm just going to continue to worship him no matter what. And I'm not worshiping the other gods. You see, they were wise men in the land. This is 15 years after the dream. So this is going to be 17 years after they've arrived in the land. Daniel, who was 17 at the time, will be 34 by now. You're actually having these young men who are in their 30s and they've just lived faithfully unto God, but they've risen to the top. They've taken in the literature and the language of the country of Babylon. They were proven to be the wisest above all other wise men. And yet it didn't get into them. They kept the culture of the kingdom. They kept the culture, their Hebrew culture, and just trusted God and kept doing that. And there were moments that came along. There were these trials that came along, these events that came along every so often that were catastrophic. But that's when they chose to, I'm just drawing a line in the sand and I'm not crossing it. I do not compromise when it comes to the worship of God. I will not worship any other gods, anything else besides him. And as a result of them standing their ground, God came in and proved himself that he was real. He was like when he said back over in verse 15, and who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Well, that's the Lord God Almighty. That's Jehovah. He delivered him from his hands. And so the king's word, King saw, oh, I'm not even going to, if this is what your God can do, I'm not even going to upset him. You've frustrated my words. I'm changing my decision regarding you, and I'm changing my word concerning the law that I've determined. So let's keep going. Let's go over to any comments about that? Anything? See, things happen when people stand. Yeah, go on.
Idea about frustrating being a perfect word, that because in our mind, well, in my mind, when I'm like, yes, I'm currently frustrated. Spot on. I am very frustrated with stuff going on, but my frustrated definition is not what you've just said. So it's very interesting to even understand that.
Yeah. So
wow.
So even if you look at an imperfect word, a word that's classed as imperfect is a word that is ongoing. It implies that something's not completed. It implies that something will have a flow-on effect. It's not accomplished because it's going to impact generations, and it's going to keep going. It's going to keep building. But a perfect word means it's completed, it's done, that's it. Ma, I should say up in Meningrida, ma, probably in other communities, that's it. Not dealing with that anymore. And yeah, totally different to what we'd say is that word frustrated. I suppose if we looked at from the point of view of where we get frustrated about something and then we just go to the Lord about it and trust him. But yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Any other comments? Okay, let's go on to Daniel 3, verse 29 to 30. Thanks, Jen.
Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
So that's, I'm just admitting someone here. Just let me say hello to Cassie. Hey, Cassie. Hi, Cassie.
Hey, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Not a problem. We're just looking at the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And we've just read a bit in Daniel 3, verse 26 to 28. Verse 28, we see that the wording, they frustrated the king's word. Nebuchadnezzar said, "You frustrated my word." So basically verse 29 to 30 is the change he's made. And he will keep this. In fact, this law continues right up until Daniel in the lion's den, when another king, King Darius, makes a change. And so that's 60, that's not 66 years, because 66 years is when they arrived. But if they're in their 30s now, Daniel's in the lion den in his 80s. So this particular law continues strong. That's why when I said they frustrate the king's word, it's that perfect word, which means he's changed his mind, he's changed his word, he's changed the law, and it's not going to change again. That's it. It's final. And so as long as he's alive, it will remain this law ongoing. So yeah, that's the degree the decree he made. So let me just, what is that? So Babylon wants to control. This is the Babylon wants to. This is what they wanted to do. This is how they, remember, changed the culture. We're adding to the list. Babylon wants to control who we worship, who they worship, who we worship. They control who they worship, encouraged idol worship. It started with their name changes in Daniel chapter 1. Remember, their names changed to something that worshipped a particular god. And now here they're actually wanting them to worship another god. Just see who's. What was the comment? Jen, you've got here in the chat. So just stand. Did you get a?
So when you were explaining the perfect word frustrated,
Yeah.
gave the example of, okay, so you just go to prayer. I was like, okay, so after you've done all you can, just stand. So you're frustrated, so it's done, it's over, it's finished. Just stand firm in your word, firm in the decision. It's done. Just stand.
It's done. As I said, Ma.
Well, I got that before, right? I'm on board.
Yeah. That's in our context. In this context, the king actually brought a decree that became a permanent, which was frustrated, the king's word. It's a perfect word. So this is what then he said, and that's what lasted. So he allowed them to worship their own God. He allowed their protection to be set up so no one would harm them or speak against them in any way. It's interesting in 2 Timothy 3 and verses 1 to 6. This was evident in the Roman culture in Paul's day. He said, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. The people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. Avoid such people. This is really a form of idolatry that's showing here, even to say having the appearance of godliness, having the appearance of something to be worshipped, but there's no power in it. So this really, even in the Roman culture, self and I am and the pursuit of stuff just led to an idolatry that was as real as what was happening in Daniel here. And in Timothy is actually Paul's dealing with this with Timothy. Hey, listen, this Roman culture is starting to infiltrate the church and we need to watch it, this idolatry. So it's interesting. Any comments about that?
It stood out to me. I don't know why, or if it means anything or nothing at all, but just my brain sort of thought in verse 2, lovers of self. I thought, I wonder if that sort of means the same thing as self-care. And like, not that, I don't know, like self-care in itself isn't bad, but
no,
there's sort of like a bit of I feel as a mum, there's an expectation to be a mum, be all put together with good makeup, look good, have time for self-care, have time for friends, do all these things, and that's what makes you a complete person or whatever. And I'm like, I'm actually a terrible person if I don't make any time for myself. Like I try. But at this phase of my life, maybe, I can't go get my hair done and things like that. And I don't know, like it's just like a thing that sort of popped into my head. That I'm like, you can almost feel pressured that you're not quite meeting expectations if you aren't taking time for yourself and loving yourself in the way that the world thinks you should love yourself. Anyway.
Well, that's interesting. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Let's unpack that a bit more. The particular lovers of self used in this Greek here is more of a love of putting yourself before others, and it's a lifestyle of that. But you've brought up something, Laura, which is I think is key, because very much, you know, the Bible says, it talks about loving your neighbors as you love yourself. And so loving people comes out of loving yourself. And so loving yourself doesn't necessarily mean, well, what does that look like for you guys? What does loving yourself look like for you? Because I think that's a good point. You've made a good point.
I think in like, you know, like Laura said, in the world today, like there's such a focus on self-care, and while I'm all for it, like I think there's a difference of having self-care for your own like mental health, and putting it over, you know, neglecting your kids, neglecting your husband. Oh, I've got to go get my hair done. I got to go shopping. I got to go do this. It's all, you know, self-care. But when you're neglecting the needs of your family, that's, I feel like that's when it changes to love, you know, loving yourself. I think it's important that we take care of ourselves, you know, like, you know, saying you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
I think it's important that, you know, even if it's a couple minutes every day, you know, different things that you can do. But when it becomes a priority and it's taking over, that, yeah, then your family is neglected, then I think it switches then to you are, I would consider that more lovers of self then. If that makes sense.
And I over the years, I've, you know, when you see someone who has, and I'm just using, I know there's people from different backgrounds here. Yeah, Cassie, I'll just say this point, and then you can have your point. I used to often see come through couples where the male, for example, the male, I can say that because that's the example of that, was married but lived like a single man, and then just neglected the family, and there was no time for the family. It was always off doing other stuff. What were you going to say, Cassie?
It's hard though. My biggest struggle, and self-care for me is predominantly my work because I love it so much. But I think the danger, and what I'm trying to learn now as a second-year teacher rather than a 22nd-year teacher, is finding that healthy work-life balance. Health,
That's good.
family, teaching, self-care for me is my painting and things like that. But like you said, Jen, not at the neglect of the family, but if I spend all my time at work, which is what I find I've gotten home 20 minutes ago, because I choose to do that, so that I can prepare for the 8 children I teach. But I forget that not that I forget, but sometimes I have mum guilt because I am not the wife. I'm not the mother that's coming home to 3 children here, because they have got such complex needs, and teaching gives me a break from this. But it's all about that, like finding that right balance.
Yeah, that's right. And it is. And I think going back to when we started in the first lesson in James, it says, okay, there's trials, there's things happening, these events happening, and how you deal with them is important. But then we went on to lesson 2 to say, and if you're finding it hard, ask for wisdom. See, God will give wisdom for you in any situation. And so that wisdom to know that balance, how do I balance this, Lord? How do I do this? It's okay to ask him for wisdom. It's okay to seek from him wisdom in any situation. We've all got seasons that we're going through. Laura, seasons of babies, tiny little babies. And that's, and Cassie, where you're, you know, just a 2-year teacher in the situation you're in. And then Rachel, you know, because we've got 3 or 4 teachers here. And so we're at different stages in life, but there's always something that's trying to tug away at our time and draw our energy away. And it's like you said, Jen, it's the cup. You know, if we're giving out, and then we find ourselves empty, then we know we can't go any further until we actually fill up a bit more, and we do something to fill up. And that's where the wisdom is going to be important to know, Lord, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I just, Laura, when you mentioned about, your hair, I thought, I'd love to be able to know a hairdresser to send her around to your place, just so that mums, and with that, got so many babies in the church, but then mums with bubs just being able to have their hair done, just do something different, yeah, it's challenging. It's yeah, anyway.
I think you're right with the seasons, everyone's season of life is different. I know when my kids were little, I never had that time. And
Yeah.
I loved reading, and that would be my thing. When the kids would go to bed, I would just sit and read. And looking back now, I realized that was kind of my self-care thing. But even stuff like this Bible study, I would consider this a self-care thing because, we're being able to fellowship with other Christians and learn the Bible together. So I consider this a bit of self-care as well. So
it's good.
But it's not the lover of self where I'm putting this in front of everything else. I feel like my relationship with God's a priority. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
that's great. Let's see who said this. Put something in there. You've got the love languages help you sometimes. Cassie, you want to unpack that a bit more?
So for me, my love language is physical touch and quality time.
Yeah.
But my husband's is not. His is words of affirmation. No, sorry, acts of service and quality time.
Yeah.
I don't want to wash the dishes because I don't like washing the dishes, but he likes the dishes being done. And so even simple things like just knowing what people's love languages are, can help you work out, in addition for asking for wisdom, what that balancing act can look like.
That's great.
That's a good point, Cassie, because he likes the dishes done, so that can be more of a priority, whereas then other things can not be such a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like doing the dishes, but I probably should do them more often.
Yeah.
Because then his cup's getting full and mine should be getting full for helping, find that balance and stuff. That's all.
You buy a dishwasher.
I was gonna say
we've got one. It doesn't work. Andrew's the dishwasher.
Bummer.
I was saying, as your kids get older, then you just start giving them that job.
Talking about love languages, my husband. Here we go. Little revealing time. My husband is a hugger. He loves physical touch. And then I'm not a hugger. Well, I hug at church and all these things, but lingering, I just can't do. And so it's almost like a wrestling match. He wants a hug and I'm trying to get away. It's just a bit funny. But anyway, it's like that.
So all those that go to Jenny's church on Sunday, you need to give her a long, lingering hug.
That's all right. I'm with you, Jenny.
That's right. And so's Ray. Ray is too. Ray doesn't do long hugs. There's actually quite a lot of people in the church that don't do long hugs. So it's good.
There's a limit where then it's awkward,
I know, right? Yeah.
Okay. For those of us that live bush, I'm not actually, I hate touching, but because I'm so deprived of the touching, whenever I see you, that's why I hug you, but I don't like hugging. So it's really a pouring forth from the grace of Jesus. And then I soak it in, and then I take it back bush with me. But I'm not, no.
That surprises me. I would have thought you'd be a hugger.
Yeah, I'd go in for the hugs. I thought you were.
And I won't touch everybody. Sorry, we're getting off topic. I'm so sorry.
So funny. Well, how long do we have? Yeah. Anyway. Oh, that's funny. That's good. Well, thank you, Laura, for bringing that up. That's something we needed to look at. So let's get back to our notes where it says, what do we know about the 3 Hebrew men's actions? Without looking at your notes. What stood out to you for the qualities of these men? What can we see? What can we learn from them?
Oh, they were faithful.
Yep.
Courageous, even in the facing death, they still stood up for what they believed in.
Yeah. Yep, I'm writing these down.
They stood true to their strength.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good.
And I think they supported each other, didn't they? Like they,
Yeah.
none of them sort of ran away from the situation. They all stuck together, stayed together.
Which is that we saw back in the first, in the last one, that community, seeking out community, how important community is during these times, to have like-minded people around you. That's key. Yeah. Honor, you got anything to say, to add? You're on mute.
Oh, finally, I've had trouble unmuting myself.
Oh no. I thought you were being a bit quiet. I thought, what?
I just did at that second. What was I going to say?
I asked if you had anything else to say.
Yeah, I do like how simple their trust is. But I think for them in the moment, it may not have been very simple because, you know, trust is such an active thing. It's not always simple. It's trust in the face of things can still be really difficult.
Yeah.
But we read it as a beautiful, simple trust. Like it conveys to us as this beautiful story of them walking into the first. But I really like the active nature of that faith and trust and what it would have been like for them in that. Yeah.
And look, I think had they been in that situation, you know, their heart would have been racing, and they, you know, they still would have, they'd comment about like God's going to deliver us, but if he doesn't, we're still not going to worship any other gods. So the thought of, hey, we're about to die, so we could be about to die. Let's deal with it. Let's just do it. And so, you know, the adrenaline going, the heart pumping, the you know, that those feelings would start coming up in the body. Well, I believe they would have been. I don't know. I wasn't there, so I wouldn't know, but I believe they'd be reacting the same way we do when we stand on something and we're trusting and believing, and we draw the line in the sand and we say, no, I'm not going over here. I know what goes on the inside is going on the inside of me. And so that's dealing with your emotional response to something, but still keeping faithful while those emotions are raging is key, you know.
Next stop. Is it called hallucinating when you start saying?
Kind of just muted here.
That's okay. That's fine. Well, you can keep it unmuted if you want, Honor, if you think that it's not going to turn on again. Do sign language. Okay, so we see also, I've got written here, in the things relating to the worship of God, they remained resolute and steadfast. That's that word forbearance, not giving up, but continuing in a way that honors God. They answered truthfully the question asked. That's really key. And for those people who are in church service on Sunday, that's what we're talking about. When people ask you a question, you live a questionable life, and they ask you a question, you answer truthfully. Don't beat around the bush. Someone asks you a question, just dive in, just say, give the answer. So they asked truthfully, they spoke their faith, and then they believed God would deliver them. However, if he didn't, they were willing to lay down their lives to stand for the truth of what they believed. And what was the results of this? I should, you know, like, why don't I remember to do the, where am I going? Going the wrong way. I should remember that I've got this. Yeah. We know about the actions. The result of their actions. Will you tell me what was the result of their actions?
God was exalted.
Yeah. The true one was worshipped. Yes. What else?
The king's heart was changed.
Yeah. His word was frustrated. It's that whole frustrating his word. We see in the next lesson 4, we see that he is totally changed. He is totally changed to the point where he is worshiping God. So over that time, he just sees the character of these guys, the way in which God moved in the land, and it changed the king's heart. At this point here, His word is, he's seen it. He knows he's real. His word's been frustrated. He changed his words as a result of God's deliverance. Yeah, definitely. And then the other one was they were promoted again. I mean, how can you just seeing them rise up? And even later, you know, we see Daniel is still looking out for him later on, and he's still promoting them. And yeah, it just, to think that these men, majority of the time, lived in peace as far as peace goes in an empire. But now at this point, they're able to live out their life the way that they want to live it out, up until the time Nebuchadnezzar passes away. If we see 20 years later, Daniel 4, let me read to you from Daniel 4, verses 1 to 3. This is 20 years later. This is King Nebuchadnezzar speaking this. This is his prayer. King Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Just 20 years later, he is declaring that. It's pretty good, isn't it? But when you're in a kingdom building time, it's great to have the mentality that you're going to be in it for the long haul, that you're just going to keep being faithful, keep doing what you're doing. This is, if that's, this is 37 years after they've arrived in Babylon, that particular part in Daniel 4. So the king's heart's changed just in 37 years. Look at what it happens. So what can happen in our town, in our country, if we faithfully just continue to serve the Lord and keep doing what we're doing, live out the way that Daniel and these fellas have been? They've been faithful. They haven't got up and protested. You know, they've just kept going faithfully. We're going to find that when we look at the book of James, it covers a lot of this same stuff. Actually, it's covering the same stuff, and how these fellas are acting and living is what's covered in the book of James. So it's rather eye-opening. I wanted to start with this one, so it provided a picture, an illustration for you, so that we know then what are the qualities that we're to do when living in trials and going through trials in an age of empire building. Yeah, so that's it for tonight. What I've got at the bottom there at the last part is the timeline. You really, again, I put the timeline on. Do you notice Daniel in the lion's den is 66 years after his arrival in Babylon? So in the first 6 chapters, 66 years passes. That's having a mindset of, I'm going to dig in and just keep faithfully serving God, no matter what's happening around me. And I'm going to stay faithful to him because I know he will remain faithful to me or to them, you know. Any other comments? Hey, what's your thoughts? What's some things you're taking away from here? Yes, Laura.
I was just thinking that it stands out most to me that the phrase safety in numbers, like coming back to that whole seeking community thing, but
yeah,
I think the 3 men were braver because they knew the man next to them believed the same that they did. Like, I imagine it would have been 3 times harder if it was just one of them standing before the king defying him. And it just, sort of says, you know, surround yourself with good people, good like-minded people, and they will help you, you know.
Yeah.
stand up for the right thing, because you'll see, oh, they're doing that, they're doing that. Yep, this is the right thing.
Yeah.
It's just easier when
Yeah.
when you're in a group and you're all in agreement. I mean, sometimes we do have to stand up on our own, but
Yeah.
it's in the fridge, in a bag.
Hi, Ken. Hi, Ken.
Baby's crying in the background.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's excellent. I've written that
Yeah.
down. So see me.
Hopefully that makes sense.
No,
Kinda
that's
reminds
great.
me of and if I can find it out, I'll share it. But there's like a little, I'll say meme, but it's not meant to be funny. But there is like it's in the concept of people praying for each other, but there's like one person walking, and there's like, I think they're holding like a ladder above their head, and it kind of was just showing like the importance of fellowship, but also praying for each other, because you're able to kind of hold each other up, and they're kind of walking over and there's like a hole or something, and so the one person's able to be holding onto the ladder while the other ones are carrying it. And it's just a reminder of like, you know, I guess finding your people and, you know, being able to pray for each other. Laura, when you were talking, that picture popped in my head. I think that is really good.
Yeah, and I like what you said, Laura, about they were brave in knowing that they had someone standing on their side, standing beside them, who was like-minded. Surround yourself with good, like-minded people. Yeah. Yeah, it's that whole iron sharpens iron. Yeah.
And they would have been aware of the fourth person in there too, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't have just been others that were seeing it. They would have been seeing it too and feeling that presence.
Yeah, I believe so. Because we don't get to hear their thoughts or whatever, or see their thoughts or conversation about him. They just knew that he was going to save them, and if not, they're willing to die. Yeah. So that's a good point, Ray. I'd never thought of. Gee, I'd love to ask Sam, what was it like having him in the fiery furnace with you?
I hope they were able to see it, because that would have been really comforting.
Them. Comforting. Yeah.
I had never thought about that.
No, I hadn't either. I hadn't. And when you look at when going through things, and you know, when you seek wisdom from the Lord to know how to go through things, and you're seeking out community, people to help support and pray with you, that whole coming out, the metaphor of not smelling of smoke and not having their hair singed. You know, there's nothing wrong with us trusting and believing the Lord for when we're going through trials, that we're going through things that we can believe for, coming out of it metaphorically not smelling of smoke or having your hair singed. There's really nothing wrong with that. I believe that part of our just trusting the Lord, and with Psalm 91 and those sorts of scriptures, is that we trust him as our deliverer. He's shown throughout the Old Testament so many times that he delivers. He is there to you know, he's under the shadow of the Almighty. You know, that can be our dwelling place. He's our strong tower, the one we run to, the one that we trust in. That's who he is. And so no matter what's going on, he'd be the first place we run to. Even if it's just sitting on the lounge, just even talk to him. Like, even ironing, Lord, you're so wonderful. I just give you praise and glory and honor. I worship you. You're the Almighty. I just thank you for what, you know, just moving in this situation, or just thank you for who you are and what you've done for me. So it's just being aware that he delivered you through Christ, and he will continue to be there to deliver you. Some things we will have to go through. Other things we'll have, you know, be delivered from, but it's having that same attitude as these three fellas. Even if he doesn't deliver me, I will not compromise. Even if I die, by standing firm, I will not compromise. I like to, over the years, I've asked a few people this question: would you still serve him even if will you still worship him even when times are bad? Because it's easy to worship God during the good times and when things are going great. And Lord, I thank you that this is doing this and this and this is happening. But when times are bad, when you're in the valley, when you're in the tough times, that's when it becomes a sacrifice of worship and praise. That's when it's a sweet aroma, because willingly you're worshiping him when you don't feel like it, when times are bad. And it's that sweet aroma. Easy to worship him when times are good. What do you do when times are bad? That's that. These guys, that's what they did. Yeah.
There's a song, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Even If by Mercy Me.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful song. It's kind of on the lines of this, but the lyrics say, or the chorus, I guess, it's easy to sing when there's nothing to bring me down, but what will I say when I'm held to the flame like I am right now? And then, the chorus is like, I know you're able and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. It's one of my favorite songs, but every time I come to this passage, I think of it, and it just, yeah, it's really good.
That's good. Yeah. That's wonderful. Any other comments before we finish up?
On that there, I just had a small little testimony that came to my mind.
Yeah.
And it was just recently because we've been heading up to the tip of Australia, and we arrived in Mackay, and I was hit with our family, we were hit with some really bad news. And it was just to do with my daughter. She's 13 and she got a really bad diagnosis. And, we were told she was with scoliosis in her spine. And we're out doing this big trip and we're in the middle, just so far from home. And I saw red and I was so hurt. I was devastated the whole trip. Everything just flashed before my eyes. I didn't know what to do. I was away from church, away from family, felt very alone. I was really, I felt very far from God. I was angry with him initially. I was like, God, you've led us out here. We know that you led us out here. We've had so much provision and everything. You've paved the way. What are you doing? Why am I now in the middle of this horrible thing with my little girl looking at me saying, Mummy, is it going to be all right? God will fix this. And trying to swallow down the tears, looking at it all and just wrestling with all of that. And so we packed up our family and we went, all we could do was we went to church, and Jake and I were both feeling it, and we're both trying to hide it from her, and she's really cluey, so she's 13, she doesn't miss a trick. But we went along to this beautiful church in Mackay, and we just sat there for the day, and I just couldn't stop crying, but God just ministered to us, and we sat there in the church, and we went back in the evening and we sat in the church and people prayed for us, and it was an incredible time. But I guess the thing I'm getting to is that, so we went on and we did the rest of the trip. We went all the way up to far North Queensland, came all the way back down. And just this week, the last place on earth that I wanted to go was back to Mackay. And I hadn't even thought about it, but we were coming back through, and I was pretty keen to just keep going. I hadn't stopped to really think about why I was feeling like that. But of all the places to end up, we ended up at the same place, the same plot of ground that we were on when we found out, called Holt Road, where the Lord sort of got us to stop in our tracks, halt, and look at the situation in front of us. And my heart was racing, and I'm like, oh God, what is going on here? Why am I here? What? And as I sat down and had a cup of tea and just prayed about it, it was like he just showed me his faithfulness and how he'd walked through the last couple of months with us, and he hasn't dropped us, and he's answered so many things for us along the way, and just rebuilt that that trust in me, which was really difficult to walk out.
Yeah, beautiful.
I don't know. So
beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. That's it's hard. Like there's times where we just think, oh, what are you doing? That's right. What are you doing? Wow. And that's still a journey you're continuing to take. And just continue trusting him, because things don't take him by surprise. And continue to just love him, the mountains and the valleys, both. Yeah. Thank you, Honor. That would have been really hard. Very hard.
I was also just quickly thinking back on that scripture you were sharing about in 2 Timothy. I can't remember the reference about lovers of self.
Yeah.
Through like my kids are sort of grown up a bit, or semi-grown up, 17.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. But anyway, when I was really empty, I as a mum, I've always tried lots of things to go and fill up.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, it's really nice when I'm doing it. It's nice when I get my hair done, or it's nice when I have a massage, and I'll walk into the house and I'll feel quite light. But then within not long at all, it doesn't seem to last very long. It's very shallow. And without over spiritualizing things, I can't help myself, because the only thing that's ever brought any relief has been God's presence, and what I'm just trying to say, Laura was talking about with other people and fellowship, and other women or other people around me praying, or fresh touch from the Lord, and new in feeling. That's the only thing that ever brought. And so then when I think about the bravery of these dudes going into the furnace, and where do they get the strength from? I just think it has to be an eternal focus, and it has to be just God.
That's right. It's interesting that you say that eternal focus, because the whole point of this series called Facing Babylon was all named based on Daniel, which we'll see in lesson 5, going into his room, at that time where Nebuchadnezzar has died, and King Darius has put a decree out about worshipping again and bowing to other gods. And Daniel goes into his room and he looks out the window. He's actually looking at Jerusalem. It's his focus, because he knows God's promise to deliver Israel back to Jerusalem. And he looks to Jerusalem. He looks through Babylon, and he faces Jerusalem, and he begins to pray. And he had that eternal vision. Now it's like what Christ had when it says that, oh, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. Daniel had that same attitude. Now, he was facing Babylon, but he was looking at Jerusalem. He was looking at something else. And that's it with us. We have to, our eternal vision is the big picture of what God is doing. Our eternal vision is keeping our eyes focused on him, looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And no matter what happens around us, just trusting the Lord, keeping that trust in him, that, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to keep faithfully doing these things. And look, there's people who will have testimonies that they've done the same thing Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, and they were promoted. They were raised to high levels in the land. In some of these countries where there's persecution happening, and Christianity's not allowed to worship openly or even gather together openly, and yet there are people rising to the top because they're doing exactly what Daniel, these fellows, do. Thank you, Jen. I know you said you had to go, so it's good being able to hear your voice, Dal. Anything else to finish off? Let me just see what I've got here. See if I go the right way. Daniel 4, I just read that one out. No, it's it, Facing Babylon. That's for the picture I get. The picture I get of Daniel looking out that window towards Jerusalem, but what he's actually seeing over what's in front of him is Babylon. And, you know, we look out and see a lot of things happening at the moment, but keep our eyes focused on the eternal stuff. Keep our eyes focused on the end game, the big plan. Kingdom building. Yes, we're into kingdom building in spite of empire building going on around us. Yeah. Cool. That's it for today, girls. Anything else anyone wants to say before we finish? Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for taking an hour and 15 minutes out of your Wednesday night every fortnight. I appreciate you doing that. And next time, we look at the king's heart changed. I'm looking forward to that. Nebuchadnezzar and what impact it has and how he changes. Let me see, making sure. Thank you very much, Cassie. Thanks, everyone. Be praying for each other. You've seen each other's faces. If each other comes up in your memory or during the day, you think of each other, just pray for each other. Pray, pray for honour. Pray for a daughter. Pray for the family as they travel around. Pray for the teachers. Pray for young mums. Pray for each other. We've all got
find healthy balance.
Yeah, exactly. Let's make that something that we do pray about this fortnight. A healthy balance, wisdom, and a healthy balance in that work and life, family life, and all that. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, thank you very much. It's good to see your faces. Hello. How are you? Good to see your faces. Enjoy the rest of the night. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.